Hi, we're here with Scott Strickland. He's CIO of Wyndham Hotel and Resorts, and he's going to tell us about his hybrid cloud strategy and how to deal with technical debt and some of the other things. Thanks for joining us, Scott.
Thank you for having me.
So I guess walk us through the history of Wyndham Hotels. If I recall, you were kind of spun out recently and you've had some technical debt to work through. So I guess catch us up on the company overall.
Absolutely. So about a year ago, in June of 2018, we spun off from Wyndham Corporation. So they formed two companies. One of them was the timeshare company and the other is the Hotel and Resort Co. And as part of that spinoff, we then needed to build out our own infrastructure and set of applications completely independently. We used to be able to rely on a set of shared services out of the corporation, and now we had to survive on our own.
Okay, so you also had some technical, is that a challenge or an opportunity? Because on the one hand, you can break free. On the other, it's tough to build that stuff out, but it's also, you kind of have a green field. So how did you approach it?
We approached it actually as an opportunity. The good thing is as part of that spinoff, then we had some capital that we were able to invest. And so we looked at the entire thing as a greenfield, as you indicated, and said, what type of infrastructure do we want to have as a new company? And we settled very quickly on cloud. We said, when we pull this across, we don't want to put it into one of our old data centers. We had 3 data centers that we were up and running. We said, let's not do that. Let's instead move that out into a co-location and where possible, re-platform that out into AWS.
Okay, so you were instantly looking at a mix of clouds, basically, whether it's internal or external.
We knew we were going to be in a hybrid cloud environment from the day they said we were going to spin. Absolutely.
Okay. So how did that change your approach to applications? And you're running a hotel chain, so you obviously need a lot of stuff on the customer experience front. How did you go about thinking through your application strategy?
One of the nice things that worked out really well for us is we were already migrating to SaaS-based applications wherever we could. And what this did is it accelerated our migration out into other SaaS apps. And the benefit of moving out into a SaaS app is we could take a lot of our infrastructure that was running in some of our data centers or in the data center we were going to have to move out of corporate. And instead of migrating that infrastructure to support our application, we could instead just go out to a SaaS provider and not ever have to execute the lift and shift that was necessary there. So what we did is we looked at 5 to 6 key platforms to run through our stack. As you indicated, our guest experience is absolutely critical. So we looked at Adobe very quickly and ramped up our spend and ramped up our investment on Adobe and said, how quickly can we get out of our data center and running our stacks and get all in on Adobe and the audience experience manager platform there.
Okay. And then how did you look at, customer service and CRM and HR and those kind of things?
They're in a very similar fashion. So when we looked at CRM, we said, okay, let's not build our own CRM platform. We had an internal legacy platform and we started an immediate migration to Salesforce.
Okay.
And we migrated to Service Cloud for our franchisee facing service. So something that's interesting about IT at Wyndham that most people wouldn't expect is if you're at a hotel and you're a franchisee, when you have a technical issue, you actually call our group. So you call into us if you can't find somebody's reservation when they're checking in, if you're having a problem with the app, if you have an issue with any of your on-property technology, we support that. So we made a migration and executed a migration to Service Cloud right there at the beginning.
So your customer service approach is franchisees and then folks like me who might be in an owned and operated place.
That's exactly right. So we have guests. We serve 3 customers. We serve the guest, folks like you. We serve the franchisee, and we serve our own internal team members. We have 17,000 employees worldwide. So what we did there is we said, let's get onto one platform with Salesforce that can service all 3 of those and just have something consistent. And we're using the ITSM platform out of Salesforce called Manage as well.
Okay. So were you basically looking at your cloud stack as sort of a best of breed approach?
We were. So we said, who are the absolute best players for each of these functional areas, each of these domains? Let's identify those, and then let's build out the integration where absolutely necessary between those domains. As I indicated, we have 5 or 6 key platforms there. The service platform is one of them. The digital platform is another. And then we have the central reservation platform that feeds out to Expedia and the other OTAs. We have the property management platform, which obviously is what they actually use at the hotels. And then we have our financials platform with Oracle Cloud.
Okay. So as you worked through this, was there a lot of vendor churn, or what you had previously was mostly internally built?
There was some vendor churn. So we had, for example, if you take a look at our central reservation systems, we had a combination of 3 legacy CRs that we were running internally, and then we had 2 externals. So there were some bake-offs. We went through the classic RFP process and some bake-offs, and then ended up just selecting one platform globally. And thinking through that process, it was absolutely critical to us to find somebody that was global in nature and that believed in partnership. And when we say partnership, we just don't mean cutting your price. We mean, hey, let's work together and let's understand where the hospitality industry is going and where Wyndham is going, and let's jointly build out some of that functionality in future releases. So on every one of those 6 platforms I articulated, we sit on the customer advisory board and we help shape future direction for those products.
So a cloud vendor that had vertical focus in your industry was key.
Absolutely critical for us. And it couldn't be somebody that was nascent either. It needed to be somebody that had some demonstrated capabilities there and wasn't just building it out for the first time.
Okay. So the application stack's sounds like it's mostly cloud, if not all cloud. How did you approach the infrastructure? What did you figure out to put on AWS versus, I know you're doing managed services or managed hosting with Rackspace. So how did you figure out what goes public cloud versus what stays, on-prem sort of, and how did you approach that?
So where there was a SaaS application available, we tried to execute a migration there, which required a lot of acceleration and a lot of business investment as well in terms of their time. Where there wasn't a SaaS application, so take, for example, our data warehouse. There's not necessarily a SaaS data warehouse. We looked at that workload and said, how do we distribute that across legacy infrastructure, something at a colo such as a Rackspace, and where do we put it into AWS? And what's the balance? Because you're going to pay. You got to pay to play out in AWS. And at our volumes, putting everything out into AWS may not have made sense for us. So we looked at what's the total cost benefit on that and where is something going to be a differentiator for us in the future. Okay.
So I guess as you were evaluating those costs between AWS and your own data centers, what time frame were you looking at in terms of total cost? Was it 3 years, 4 years, 2 years?
It was a 2-year. Actually, it was a 2-year cost because our belief is, given Moore's Law and everything that's going on there, predicting future AWS costs was going to be difficult. We could say it's roughly going to decrease by 30 or 35% every 2 years or so, which is something we've candidly seen. So we just looked at a 2-year horizon there on our payback.
Okay.
And what we're finding actually, Larry, is kind of interesting is it continues to decrease at AWS at a greater rate than we originally forecasted, which then makes the migration and the intent, the availability of our migration out into the cloud, the public cloud, more appealing.
Okay. So are you optimizing your AWS instances, or is that something you have somebody else do?
Oh, yeah. So we are optimizing it. You can see me laugh there. We receive our monthly billings and weekly billings, and we have our portals and everything there. Right now, we're not as optimized as we should be. We've spooled it up. We're running it. We're happy to be out there in that cloud. We're starting to move more into their on-demand, their Lambda infrastructure, which can spool up and spool down and instantaneous. So we have an 18-month or so roadmap that's going to move our services where possible into that Lambda type architecture so that we can decrease our overall cost. Right now, I'd say it was more of a replatforming than it was an optimization strategy.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's a common theme for cloud customers, and I'm not sure if the expectation is that, oh, well, we'll just do this and it'll magically cut costs, or I think a lot of customers are underestimating the optimization part of it. So what did you learn about optimization as you kind of, tweak your billing, so to speak?
Sure. If we look at actually our old legacy data center costs to our new hybrid cloud, we decreased costs by about 55%. So that was great. And what that did is that bought us a lot of air cover and some time to go through that tweaking capability. What we've discovered is we needed to create some internal functions that didn't exist before. We had to create a role, actually, and we just posted for it, a role where their job is to look at our AWS and our public cloud spend on a monthly basis and understand where it's coming from, and then work with our development teams who have instantiated some of these instances, for example, work with our production teams and start to challenge them on when can we turn these up and turn these down. So we had to create a role as well.
And on the data center side, the stuff you're keeping in-house, how does that get optimized? And I guess, how do you approach it in terms of just cost and sort of what it gives you that you can't get in the public cloud?
So we've just started an APM, application portfolio management strategy, where we've mapped out each of our apps that are running there in the co-location facility. And we've said, okay, does it need to run here or not? Is it cheaper, quote unquote, to run here? What's our long-term direction on this? In some cases where we believe it's a differentiator, so take, for example, our data warehouse, we're going to keep it in that co-location facility because we believe the total cost of ownership on terabytes and terabytes, almost petabytes of data at this juncture is less in a co-location facility. For some of the other applications, we have an on-purpose plan over the next 3 years or so to gradually migrate those out into more SaaS-based apps.
Okay. So the data warehouse that's staying in a data center, is that largely based on the cost to shuttle data back and forth?
It is. It's when we look at connecting into our 5 public cloud platforms, we've actually moved, so taking a step back, we actually moved that data warehouse and those 5 public cloud platforms over to the East Coast for AWS because they have West and East instances so that we could decrease our overall latency. And we looked at that total shuttling, as you said, and total storage. Yeah, and said we need to be close to these clouds where we can connect into that backbone and really move massive amounts of data on a regular basis.
Okay. So from a business perspective, what has this arrangement given you in terms of, agility, being nimble? I guess, what are some of the business perks of being hybrid? Sounds like you're hybrid, but more cloud than not.
We are. We're definitely more cloud than not. One of the biggest benefits it's given us is speed of integration. So we recently purchased La Quinta for about $2 billion or so 10 months ago. We inked that deal at the end of May in 2018. And I'm proud to say 1 week ago, so 10 months after inking the deal, we've moved them over onto our platforms. So within 10 months, they've completely migrated their financial systems, their customer service systems, their central hotel reservation, their property management has all been moved across, which is unheard of in this industry and has allowed us to realize synergies as well as get a much better view into the guests and what's going on in La Quinta now.
Now, did they keep their own systems or did that wind up being absorbed into your stack?
Completely migrated into our stack.
Okay. So is that one of the side benefits of the cloud is when you acquire companies?
Absolutely. So when we acquire people, when we acquire people, we're very able to quickly move them into our systems because we've identified key platforms that have almost a one-for-one overlap with what they're doing. The other benefit is because we're on the cloud, and as I indicated, we're on this customer advisory board in some cases where we need some additional functionality or where somebody like La Quinta was doing something that we thought was a benefit to the guest. For example, they recognized their military veterans in a way that we wanted to incorporate. So we worked with our cloud vendor partners and said, guys, we want to build out some functionality so we're able to recognize our veterans. They put that in, and then we were able to migrate La Quinta across.
Okay. As far as the customer experience goes, how important is the analytics side of things? And, where does the cloud play into that?
It's critical for us in terms of understanding what's going on, for example, on our websites and our mobile application on a daily basis. So we run a combination of Adobe Analytics which is running on our digital sites, and then the standard Google app suite as well. So we can understand how are people accessing. Is our guest accessing via the mobile app? Are they accessing via their PC? Are they on the road? Are they out of their normal environment? So we're able to build better experiences for them.
Okay. Is there anything I didn't ask that I should have?
I guess touching a little bit on the technical debt, when we spun off originally from Wyndham, we were hoping some of that technical debt would be erased. It wasn't, unfortunately, so we inherited some of the technical debt. But what we've been able to do there is work with some of our cloud vendors to say, okay, how do we migrate out and become one of your key partners for the future here? One of the benefits of being Wyndham and the largest hotel company in the world by number of properties is that we can help the cloud vendors develop solutions for the hospitality business that in turn they can leverage elsewhere.
Okay. So that vertical approach, how receptive are the cloud vendors to developing that vertical? I mean, it almost seems like it's a new development because cloud providers have been pretty horizontal. And now, they do seem more interested in industries. I guess overall, how receptive are the cloud companies to, doing that co-development, co-partnering?
Surprisingly so. When I started about 2.5 years ago, it was a little bit of a longer putt. And in the past 12 months or so, every one of those 6 platforms has approached me and said, do you want to work with us on a hospitality specific solution? Do you want to continue to build this out? So it's worked out really well. And if I was going to give advice to a cloud vendor, I would say building those verticals is the way of the future. It's not just enough to be in the cloud now. Now you need to offer me functionality and my industry functionality that we couldn't get elsewhere.
Right. Okay. Thanks for joining us.
No, thank you very much, Larry. Appreciate it.